We are the biggest entrepreneur destination on the planet. Welcome to Business Rockstars. Joining me right now, we've got Maria Rapetskaya. She is the founder and creative director at Undefined Creative. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For those who aren't familiar with Undefined Creative, can you explain what it is?
So we call ourselves a media production agency, and our focus is motion graphics. And to explain all of that, what we really do is content creation. It ranges from branding television shows. For example, last year we did Harry Connick's new show, Harry. So it meant doing everything from the logo to the on-air graphics that you see that frame the show. And then we do a lot of marketing, a lot of explainers, awareness, sort of brand positioning kind of work. And that could be seen online, it could be seen in corporate presentations. We also do some stuff for social. We do a big campaign with NHL for their partnership with SAP. And that is about 40 to 50 videos a year, a season. I want to say a year, but it's really a season. And those just play down on Facebook. And we do some live events as well. We do work with the United Nations, and that's for big screen graphics while the presentation's going on. So basically, if it's a screen, we've got it covered.
Cool. And is this something that you went to school for?
I went to school for traditional animation.
Okay.
Which involved paper and pencil, which are two tools I don't use very often these days. But I always had an affinity for abstract art in general. And so I was one girl in a class of 16 boys. And in animation, that meant everybody wanted to do like Marvel comic book heroes and things.
Yeah.
And being the only girl, I had to hold my own. But it was always these like comic book things mixed in with weird experimental like paper cuts and paint. And, you know, when I went to school, it was the mid-90s. And it was in the middle of the analog to digital revolution. So I didn't know that a field of that was called motion graphics, where I can just push like colors and shapes and text around, even existed. Much less that it was something I could make a living in. So I graduated with an animation degree. And then within a year on my first job, I stumbled onto this thing, and it's been my career ever since.
Cool. So how did you get into entrepreneurship specifically?
So I probably spent about the first 6 years or so after college working for others. And I was a art director at a post-production house that did a lot of TV shows for about 5 years of that. And when it came time for me to leave, my significant other at the time, who was also a motion graphics designer and artist, said, we should start a company. And I said, we are way too young and we don't know what we're doing and we really shouldn't. And he said, well, we at least should incorporate and get a name. So we did that. And we did that for 5 years. And we kind of bounced between sort of being a company, but then sort of being freelance artists. And, you know, it was this sort of like nebulous thing that existed and kept us fed and closed, and it was great. But after that parted ways, I started Undefined Creative because I realized that at that point, it was 5 years of not working for someone else. It would be very difficult for me to go back to that environment. And I thought, you know, I learned a bunch. Let me see if I could do this again.
So what is your strategy for reaching out? Is it cold calling? Is it emailing? What is it?
Oh, man, it is everything. It is everything and then some.
Because, I mean, it's worked for you. I mean, you're working with dream clients, you know?
Well,
you
here's
really
the thing,
are.
though. The really big secret to all of it is the majority of our business is still on referral. And most of my clients, especially the ones who have been with me from the start, some of them have been with me for 12 years now across both companies. Those are all referrals. That is literally someone that who I've worked with, picking up the phone and saying, hey, oh, I hear you need someone. Give this girl a call. And that, to date, has been the most successful way of building up our client list. What that comes down to is doing good work, doing it on time, doing it on budget, being easy to work with, being good with people, maintaining connections, and, you know, eventually someone else refers you. But with respect to things like cold calls, for me personally, I can't. Right?
You're like, not an option for me.
Not an option for me. And I think that's the other big thing about sales. You have to you have to figure out what you're good at, right? Some people would much rather pick up the phone and cold call a list rather than go to a networking event and have to connect with people face to face. For me, striking up a conversation with a stranger is not a big deal.
So that's more of your
So that's more of my
strategy.
tactic.
And I love what you said about, one, follow up. It's always necessary. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs don't understand how hard it is to make that connection, to develop a relationship. And then also something that's overlooked all the time is the repeat customers and referrals, and how that's really, really where you want to invest a lot of your time and energy, is doing a great job, because it's a lot easier to have repeat customers or referrals than to be getting new people.
Absolutely. You could run the numbers. There's formulas out for, the value of a repeat client versus how much money you spend on getting a new one, in everything from attending conferences to your marketing efforts to paying your social media team if you have one. And it becomes, for most businesses, very clear that the more clients you can retain for longer, that's just far more worthwhile.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break, so sit tight. We'll be right back. We are the biggest entrepreneur destination on the planet. This is Business Rockstars. We are the biggest entrepreneur destination on the planet. This is Business Rockstars, and we are continuing our conversation with Maria Rapetskaya. So off camera, we were talking about success and how a lot of times, thanks to society, social media, there's this false notion that you go from zero to millionaire and it happens overnight and it happens in your 20s. But obviously we know that that's not true. Tell me a little bit about what you think people and entrepreneurs in particular need to know about this.
Well, I think the first thing to realize is you're far better off starting a company with a very clear idea of what success means to you. Because if you don't figure that out and you don't have at least some kind of a concept of where you're trying to get to, where you could check that box and say, okay, this worked, you're just going to forever keep chasing a ghost in someone else's definition, and you'll never really feel like you've arrived. And I think that's super important, because growth for the sake of growth, that's not the point. So you need to have a very good idea of how you want to balance out your life with the business that you're creating. To know when you've gotten to the point where you're like, aha, that's my sweet spot. That's where I want to be. And, I learned that lesson by watching people who kept growing past that point. And the problem with that is it's very hard to turn back, because a lot of it has to do with overheads and hiring more people and bringing on responsibility. And after you've brought on, say, 10 extra employees, and you've realized, oh man, I was way happier when it was just a 10, 5, name your number.
Right.
What are you going to do at that point? You can't just say, oh, I'm going to let these 10 people go, right?
Yeah.
So you can't backpedal.
Right. You were building somebody else's dream of what they thought was success, but maybe you would have been more happy or not with a smaller business. It's just, like you said, just being in touch with what is that definition for you.
Just because everywhere we look, we're told that, success means getting to, cash out at X amount of million, or, building a company of 150 employees, or, figuring out how to do something utterly groundbreaking and then having someone walk in and buy you out. I mean, there's all of these sort of magical unicorn scenarios that, are outliers. And this is really not the way most business works. So, even for myself.
Obviously, we're not saying that those things are bad, but it's not the end all be all for happiness. And everyone's got their own journey and what they're trying to do here. And I think the lie is that once you hit one of these big milestones, whatever it may be, that all of a sudden you will have arrived and you'll be happy.
All your problems would disappear,
really,
and life is going to be great.
Yeah, but I think really probably just set the bar higher and higher and higher. Because
Exactly.
I think what we really want is we want to progress. You know, I think we are certainly made to progress, but there's shorter milestones that are a little bit more attainable, and just becoming aware of what those are for you.
Totally. I think it's also, you know, a lot of us get into a business and we tend to become sort of one-dimensional, where all of your time is now going into building this company. And the reality of it is very few of us are one-dimensional humans. I have many other interests outside of my business, and that's good. I love that. So, you know, for me, it's always been really important to balance that out so that my entire life doesn't become about just my company. And if I grow beyond the point of my comfort zone, that's what it's going to be.
And in recent months, you've really focused on creating your personal brand and seeing the importance of that. So tell me what you're doing and why this is important to you.
So the personal brand grew out of things that were personally important to me. And that had a lot to do with just the idea of giving back. I'm in a very commercial business. You know, we do a lot of advertising and marketing work, and I think that's all great, but, you know, not all of it is necessarily socially relevant. And so I always had this sort of guilty side about, you know, how can I use my talent and my skills and my knowledge to be a little bit more beneficial. And so from that, we grew a mentorship program where we take on an intern and do a pro bono project with them. I started doing a lot of pro bono work. From that grew teaching and mentoring. From that grew writing and public speaking and things like these interviews. And, you know, I realized that I have made so many mistakes along the way that it would be a shame if I, I didn't take that experience and, you know, pay it forward.
Yeah, oh, I love it. Well, I'm so glad that we found you and we got you in here. And
you can have all of my mistakes, all of the mistakes that you want.
So much insight. Thank you so much. We are the biggest entrepreneur destination on the planet. This is Business Rockstars.